our facility. We are a large system, one of the fastest growing college systems. We're in 2 counties, 6 campuses. However, today you are in the most unique campus, one that encompasses a strategic location. We're basically less than a mile from the bridge, from the river. And for us, U.S.-Mexico is the most dynamic growing locations, and we're very proud to be here, and we're looking forward to continuing growth and development, especially now what's taking place with education and our students. In fact, we're the only college system in the nation that is working with the Mexican manufacturers, which are U.S. companies across the border, and also providing online education as well. So we're very proud of that achievement. Again, thank you very much, and again, welcome to South Texas College.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having us. The committee will come to order, and without objection, the committee may recess at any point. The purpose of this field hearing is to break out of the bubble in Washington and speak to a variety of leaders who oversee those on the ground dealing with Secretary Mayorkas' crisis at our southwest border on a daily basis. And I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Good morning and welcome to the Committee on Homeland Security's field hearing in Pharr, Texas. We came to Texas for this hearing for several reasons. To get members of Congress and their staff out of the cubicles back in Washington and down here to the border to see it for ourselves. You cannot read about being a doctor and then go do brain surgery. My life experience has taught me, whether it was as an Army infantry commander or a physician needing a CT scan before deciding a treatment plan, or the CEO of my company, it takes the leader getting on the ground, seeing what's going on to make well-informed decisions. We also want the people on the border to know that Congress cares, that we see the plight of your communities. Now, this was supposed to be a full committee, but as you can see, the Democrats are not here. They decided to not show. Why? Well, they said coming here was just a political stunt. You tell me. Taking a hearing to the point of the crisis for a first-hand view, or boycotting a hearing because you know we're going to shine a light on the truth. Which of those is a political stunt? I'd say the political stunt is these empty chairs. The Democrats also talk about bipartisanship, how this committee is supposed to be a bipartisan committee. I guess for them, bipartisanship is only when you agree exactly with them. To me, bipartisanship is where you sit down together and debate the issues and talk to try to find common ground and solutions. You can't have bipartisanship if the other side fails to show up for their duty. And in the Army, when someone didn't show up, we called them AWOL, or absent without leave. Their place of duty is at this hearing because it's a full hearing, and they're not here. They're AWOL. And now for the reasons why we're here. Why is this crisis happening? Most of us here today are well aware of the tragedy at the border. 4.7 million encounters, 1.3 million gotaways. We don't know who those people are, where they are. But in the encounter number, we know drug seizures are up, individuals on the terrorist watch list are up, all at record numbers, 6 million people. In just the 2 years of Secretary Mayorkas' reign at DHS, more people have come into this country than all of the 8 years of Barack Obama's presidency and all 4 years of the Trump presidency combined. Why? What's happened? What changed? Now, some may think it's the money. We hear it from the left, not today, of course, but we hear it from the left that more money will fix this issue. But the budget didn't go away. It didn't go way down when Mayorkas was confirmed as secretary. In fact, it went up. A lack of money didn't cause this massive sudden surge. Some may think it's the numbers of Border Patrol agents. If we only had more agents sitting on the border, this wouldn't happen. Well, when Secretary Mayorkas took over, we didn't suddenly cut the ranks of the Border Patrol. They have roughly the same number as the last administration. So clearly the size of the Border Patrol is not the reason for the massive surge in people, crime, and drugs. Not that we don't need more Border Patrol agents and not that we can't put money in certain places. Some say it's technology, the systems. Perhaps it's the wall or the absence of a wall. But in all honesty, we didn't tear any wall down between the administrations. Granted, they stopped the production, but we didn't tear the wall down. Yet the people poured across the southern border, excess of 6 million people. Why? The only thing that changed were 89 successful migration policies implemented by previous administrations. And I mean administrations, plural. Seems like the migrant protection protocols, also known as Remain in Mexico, subversion of the actual laws written by Congress which require detention, the policies working to deter crossings were offensive to this administration. The companies that actually have the ICE detention contracts, companies like CoreCivic, tell me that they actually have a capacity of 25,000 people, yet ICE is only sending them about 8,000. You'd think that during the middle of a massive surge of people, those detention beds would be at capacity. Why aren't they? They aren't detaining because Mayorkas knows that detention is deterrence. And so they're just processing people in, paroling them right away and sending them into our country. And the phone calls go back to the countries of origin, telling their friends and families, come on, the door is open. The interim final rule is a rule that Secretary Mayorkas is trying to change and actually remove the judiciary branch from the decision-making on asylum. Even though Congress passed the laws many, many years ago that said the judiciary is to be involved. Why would Secretary Mayorkas want to do away with the judiciary? Why would he want to subvert laws written by this body, the Congress? It's because they want more people to come into the country. And now their solution is an app where whomever fills it out just automatically gets parole when they show up at the crossing site. That is in total contravention to what the laws passed by Congress about how people are to enter this country. I can see it now. Some drug cartel coyote, hey, for an additional fee, we'll fill the app out for you. Secretary Mayorkas' budget, a detailed analysis of it shows they're not doing anything to increase Border Patrol in any significant amount or increase technology. All it does is increase the funds, and I'm talking about billions of dollars, to process and ship people all over the United States. That's where they're asking for more money. If you talk to the sector chiefs, they're going to tell you that you can't return people back to their countries because the State Department has not renegotiated the return agreements. Why would the State Department not continue those agreements? It's because they want more people coming here in mass waves. It's clear to me, in violation to the laws written by the United States Congress, passed and signed by previous presidents, this Secretary of DHS wants nothing more than to flood the country with people. And the problem with that is it's empowered the narco human trafficking terrorist cartels. The drug cartels who just captured and killed a couple of Americans and are making billions bringing people into the United States, many of whom, once they're here, have to pay the cartels back with forced criminal labor. The cartels put out advertisements all over the world. $50,000 if you're coming from China, $30,000 if you're coming from Iran, $10,000 to $15,000 if you're coming from Central America. And then they flood those people in mass waves, just like we saw in El Paso this week, compelling the Border Patrol to focus its resources at the ports of entry. To use a military term, the cartels are neutralizing Customs and Border Patrol by forcing them to thin the lines in the rural areas. Then the fentanyl and the nefarious individuals they're trafficking into the United States come across in the rural areas. Let's look at this El Paso mass wave that attempted to come across. It required a massive response from Customs and Border Patrol, concentrating our forces in their diversionary attack. I can only imagine what they snuck around the ports of entry while those agents were blocking the mass waves of people. You should go check out what the Twitter feed actually said or what the social media post actually said. It was from the cartels. In one sector on our border that is 30 miles long, normally 200 agents patrol that area. It's down to 7 men and women pulling 3 shifts a day to cover 30 miles. Why? because the agents are moved to other parts of the border where their mass waves are coming. Look at Yuma, great example. And the video cameras placed by ranchers on the border show the cartel members in camouflage outfits wearing carpet shoes and backpacks full of fentanyl, pouring into our country. And those folks aren't counted in the numbers. So why 6 million people now? Why 100,000 dead Americans to drugs like fentanyl? Why massive crime on our border cities and now throughout all cities of this country? Why is every city and every state made into a border state? Because of the decisions, because of the incompetence, and because of the dishonesty of the Department of Homeland Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. We're here to show the American people why. We're here to find solutions to this problem, despite a president who laughed when talking about a mother who lost 2 children to fentanyl, to a secretary of DHS who seems to be okay with one sector alone, 25 to 30 Chinese nationals being released into the country with verified connections to the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese Army. That's happening. You'd think with a situation so dire that the Democrats would at least show up for the committee hearing. It's tragic that they aren't. That's the political stunt. You'd think with so many Americans dying as fentanyl pours into our country, as the drug cartels take operational control of our border, that Secretary Mayorkas would come up with something different than an app that further incentivizes people to pour into the country. But no. The failure at the southern border is not about money. It's not about numbers of Border Patrol agents, not about technology, although all of those things are needed, and we can do more and will do more. This massive crisis, this human tragedy, is the result of decisions and the incompetence of this secretary. And I believe our hearing today will begin to show the process of how this has happened and why. I want to take a second before I conclude and thank the men and women of Customs and Border Patrol, and thank our witnesses who are here today. They are doing yeoman's work. And I'm going to take chairman's privilege, members, for just a second. As somebody who's been shot at in combat, I can tell you, who's lost friends in combat, I can tell you I understand a little. I don't understand a lot of it, because you're looking for sometimes a needle in the haystack. Your rules of engagement are significantly different than ours were. But I know what it's like to have the tracer rounds coming at you. And I deeply, deeply appreciate your service and the service of the men and women who work for you. It is impressive what they do every day, despite these unbelievable challenges that have been forced on them. Thank you all for being here. And thank you. That ends my statement. Now, we're pleased to have, and let me say this line that I'm required to say. Other members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We're pleased to have 2 distinguished panels of witnesses before us today. This very important topic. I ask that our first panel of witnesses rise and raise their right hand. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you will give before this Committee on Homeland Security of the United States House of Representatives will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record reflect that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. I'd like to now formally introduce our first panel of witnesses. Raul Ortiz has served as the 25th Chief of the United States Border Patrol since August of 2021. He oversees domestic border security operations outside of the ports of entry, including over 5,000 miles at our northern border and nearly 2,000 miles at our southern border. He leads more than 20,000 Border Patrol agents and professional staff across the country in protecting our homeland, and we thank him for his leadership and his efforts to keep us safe. Stephen Kagan serves as the Assistant Director for Homeland Security Investigations and leads the efforts to combat transnational organized crime. Mr. Kagan has worked on drug and arms trafficking and money laundering operations across our country and in Mexico over the long and accomplished 25-year career. We thank him for his service, and we look forward to your valuable insights today. I thank all of our witnesses for being here today. The witnesses' full statements will appear in the record, of course, as usual, and I now recognize Chief Ortiz for his opening 5-minute statement.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. Thank you for the opportunity to represent the men and women of the United States Border Patrol and speak with you on the critical issue of border security. National security, enforcing our laws, humanitarian and rescue missions are not just a job. It's our sworn duty to secure our country and protect our communities. I am honored to serve as the 25th Chief of the United States Border Patrol. As a third-generation veteran of the armed forces, I come from a family that was called to serve in uniform. My career spans more than 3 decades, from Border Patrol agent to leadership assignments all along the southwest border, along with 2 tours in Afghanistan and multiple stints in Washington, D.C. While the operational demands of the Border Patrol shifted over the course of my career, one thing remains absolute, which is the dedication, professionalism, courage, and conviction of the men and women of the Border Patrol. Every day that I get to put this uniform on fills me with tremendous pride, and it will remain my greatest honor. It is well documented in the data and covered in the media that the last several years were some of the Border Patrol history. In fiscal year 21, over 1.6 million migrants were encountered. In fiscal year 22, over 2.2 million. And so far this year, we have seen over 900,000 encounters. The migration flow represents challenges and in some areas a crisis situation. In the past 30 years, I have physically served in almost all the locations that experienced migrant surges, to include San Diego, El Centro, and the Rio Grande Valley in the 90s. Arizona, early 2000s, and again in Rio Grande Valley and Del Rio during the last 10 years. Challenges and crises are nothing new to the Border Patrol, and I'm incredibly proud of our personnel, as well as our many partners. Now, unlike in previous surges, we are seeing traffic, including large groups, spread across multiple locations instead of just 1 or 2 specific sectors. This places a tremendous strain on Border Patrol resources and our operational posture. For a long time, investments to support border security operations have been structured around a 3-legged stool: personnel, infrastructure, and technology. But changing conditions require a 4th leg, which is a processing enterprise. In just the last few years, did we really start to invest in that 4th leg? The processing enterprise is critical in addressing current operational challenges, and we are making significant investments to include Border Patrol processing coordinators, electronic A-file processing, our unified immigration portal, and contract services, allowing agents to return to the field and patrol the border. When traffic shifts rapidly, I cannot adjust operations swiftly. When I reallocate resources and manpower, it comes at a cost to other locations. Today's border environment requires a whole-of-government solution to include international engagements, resourcing, and consequences, which could be in the form of legislative or policy adjustments. And that is where I ask for your help. We need more options. Before I close, I would like to address 3 issues that I am frequently asked about. First, our Horse Patrol units. As a former Horse Patrol agent, I can attest to how vital Horse Patrol units are in responding to remote and harsh locations. Last year's mass migration event in Del Rio was chaotic. We had over 20,000 people show up in one place in a short period of time. Even so, we were able to provide food, water, and medical care without a single loss of life. I remain proud of the work of our Horse Patrol units and what we did in Del Rio. As the Chief of the Border Patrol, I am ultimately responsible for all operational decisions. To that point, and as a senior field commander during that response, I accepted and continue to accept full responsibility for the actions taken. Second, I am extremely proud of the 190 agents that responded to the horrific mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas. Our agents ultimately made entry into the classroom, engaged the shooter, and provided critical medical care. We were there as a partner to our local and state counterparts and did everything we could to support them. I continue to champion those who demonstrated heroism to preserve life and render aid to that day. Finally, I'm often asked about the morale and well-being of our workforce. You have recognized the tremendous strain and pressure the border security situation has caused our personnel. And we have seen a rise in suicides. Tragically, 17 CBP employees lost their lives to suicide in 2022. I often worry about the well-being of our employees, and I appreciate Congress's support for our resiliency programs. While our mission and our agents continue to be the recipients of negative rhetoric, our resolve has never wavered. As a law enforcement organization, we strive to serve our communities, families, and fellow citizens with pride. Our national strategy is centered around organizational excellence, working with our partners, and building capacity to counter the criminal organizations and cartels operating in the border environment. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to your questions, sir.
Thank you, Chief. I will now recognize our next witness, Assistant Director Kagan, for 5 minutes to summarize his opening statement.
Chairman Green and distinguished members of the Committee of Homeland Security, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you and discuss Homeland Security investigations' efforts to disrupt and dismantle transnational criminal organizations. My testimony today will focus on HSI's effort to disrupt transnational criminal organizations at the border and beyond. As the principal investigative component of the Department of Homeland Security, HSI is responsible for investigating and dismantling transnational criminal organizations, or TCOs, responsible for flooding the United States with drugs, fueling the overdose epidemic. To do this, HSI conducts federal criminal investigations at every critical location in the illicit supply chain. Internationally, where TCOs operate and manufacture illicit narcotics. At our nation's physical borders, where smugglers attempt to exploit America's legitimate trade, travel, and financial systems. And in our communities, where criminal organizations earn substantial profits from selling poison to our friends, neighbors, and family members. Criminal organizations in the 21st century do not limit themselves to a single crime. The organizations have evolved beyond just narcotic smuggling and are now involved in associated crimes of weapons trafficking, human smuggling, money laundering, and more, all of which HSI investigates. HSI investigative efforts must be broad in scope to fully identify and dismantle these enterprises. HSI combats TCOs by using unique and broad investigative authorities to enforce over 400 federal laws and target TCOs from multiple investigative angles. This includes stopping TCOs from getting U.S. origin weapons and seizing the money that motivates their crimes. Simply put, HSI attacks the entire illicit network. HSI is a premier law enforcement agency best positioned to attack cartels and TCOs at each phase of the supply chain to inflict maximum damage, resulting in cascading effects against illicit networks. HSI's counter-TCO efforts begin abroad. HSI has the largest international investigative presence within DHS, comprised of hundreds of special agents strategically placed in 93 offices in 56 countries. This includes offices located in Mexico, where the vast majority of fentanyl is produced, and throughout the Asia-Pacific region, where precursor chemicals originate. The effectiveness of our international counter-TCO effort is greatly enhanced by HSI's Transnational Criminal Investigative Units, or TCIUs, which are vetted law enforcement officers and prosecutors who lead some of HSI's most significant extraterritorial investigations and prosecutions targeting TCOs. Disrupting and dismantling the fentanyl and methamphetamine precursor chemical supply chain is an integral element to HSI's approach to stopping the flow of illicit narcotics. Cartels operate on an industrial scale when producing chemicals, and these precursors serve as oxygen the cartels need to manufacture their poison destined for America's streets. HSI is attacking the illicit narcotics supply chain through an intelligence-based counter-narcotics operation that blends traditional investigative and analytical techniques with interagency collaboration, industry partnerships, and computer-based tools to disrupt and dismantle the chemical supply chain. The interdiction of precursor shipments plays a key role in disrupting the TCO's ability to produce a finished product before it even gets to our borders. At our nation's physical borders, HSI works with our DHS partners to combat the illicit TCO movement of illicit goods. As CBP deploys its new technology at the southwest border ports of entry, it will likely increase the number of CBP origin seizures. As a result, HSI will need additional staffing to support complex investigations and prosecutions to dismantle TCO threats to the homeland. Domestically, HSI Border Enforcement Security Task Forces, or BEST, represent one of the agency's premier tools in turning border seizures into TCO toppling investigations. The primary mission of the BEST is to combat the existing emergent TCOs by employing a full range of federal, state, local, tribal, and international law enforcement resources. There are currently 86 BESTs comprised of approximately 1,000 law enforcement officers from over 200 agencies and National Guard units. HSI is dedicated to using its broad and unique authorities to stop illicit drugs at every critical location in the supply chain. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you and for your continued support of HSI and our enduring effort to attack illicit narcotics supply chains. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kagan. Members will be recognized by order of seniority for 5 minutes of questioning. An additional round of questioning may be able, if we have the time today, after members have all been recognized. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questioning. Chief Ortiz, does DHS have operational control of our entire border?
No, sir.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'd like to share it with the American people. This is the actual definition of operational control that is in the code, written into the code well before I came to Congress, the definition, and I appreciate the honesty of Chief Ortiz. Do you think that, let's play a video clip here. I just want to share this question.
Will you testify under oath right now? Do we have operational control, yes or no?
Yes, we do. And
we have operational control of the borders.
Yes, we do.
Chief Ortiz, do you think that Secretary Mayorkas is lying there?
Sir, when you talk about operational control, about 10 years ago, we used operational control as a measuring stick of our effectiveness along the southwest border. My new strategy is geared towards mission advantage.
So you know I'm asking a very specific question,
yes,
and you're kind of describing how the goalpost has been moved because of the mass waves of people that are coming. My question, you heard the Secretary, he said we have operational control. That's the definition of operational control.
Based upon the definition you have, sir, up there, no.
We don't have operational control.
No, sir.
But is Secretary Mayorkas lying?
I didn't see the rest of the testimony there, sir.
He was asked if we had operational control, and he said yes. I think it's either ignorance, which is unacceptable, or it's lying. 4.7 million alien encounters, 1.3 million gotaways, a record number of individuals on the terrorist watch list, a record number of criminal alien encounters, a record number of aliens with gang affiliation encounters, a record number of drug seizures. Do these numbers project confidence to the American people that DHS has operational control?
I will tell you I have confidence and the men and women that are executing the mission out there to the best of their ability.
I appreciate
We've seen across the southwest border 9 sectors, and out of those 9 sectors, 4 of them have significant resources. When you think about the double layer fencing, some of the surveillance technology, and then the amount of agents we deployed. But in 5 of those 9 southwest border sectors, we have seen an increase in flow, and that has caused a considerable strain on our resources and really has forced the Border Patrol to move agents and even migrants to some of the other areas.
Yeah, I pointed that out in my statement, too, that the cartels have figured out if they flood certain areas, you got to shift resources, and that's allowing them to have free reign. That, to me, is the cartels controlling the southern border. Does that, I mean, think about it. Think about it for a second, like you're a military guy, and that's the perimeter, right? Do the drug cartels have control of sections of the perimeter of the United States?
I will tell you that in certain areas, the cartels control an awful lot on the southern border, south of the United States. Our men and women are out there. I just spent the last 3 days here in South Texas patrolling with some of our agents, and they're doing a phenomenal job of responding to traffic that's coming across that border.
You and
that plays out across the entire southwest border.
You and I both deeply respect the men who work for you, and I think they're doing yeoman's work. I've talked to sectors where they're pulling 90 hours a week. These guys are killing themselves. Literally 17 of them have committed suicide because they've been overwhelmed. Why is this huge surge here? What's the cause? What's the difference? You were here under the last administration, during COVID, all the excuses that have been given. So what changed?
Several things have changed, I think, across the world, if you think about it this way. We've seen individuals from 159 countries already this fiscal year.
So why do they feel suddenly, after January of 2021, that they can come here?
I would think that we have what we call push and pull factors. Some of those push factors are certainly going to be economic conditions in their host countries.
Those were there before,
yes,
Chief.
Sir.
I mean, they were there before. Hurricanes happened in Central America before. What changed?
I think as you look at the U.S. and what we're experiencing now, with the economic conditions that we have here, when you think about the health conditions that we have here, we're in much better position than most of the countries that we're dealing with just to ourselves.
I would assert to you that all that was there before January 21. The COVID was there before 2021. The economic challenges were there before 2021. I would submit to you that it's 2 things, and your sector chiefs have told me what they are. One, they're the policies. And those policies came from the promises the president made during his campaign. And 2, the State Department has allowed the return agreements to expire. Not renegotiating those agreements has prevented ICE from being able to send people back. Is that not correct?
I will tell you, our inability to repatriate individuals to certain countries is a tremendous challenge for us, and I would agree with that.
On the administration. Thank you. I yield. I've taken a little extra time. My apologies to my colleagues. I'll now recognize Mr. Higgins for his comments and questions.
Director Kagan, it's good to talk to you, sir. God bless you. I hope you and your family are well. I'm going to talk to you about China and Chinese nationals crossing the border and HSI's involvement regarding those individuals. It's noted that there's an increase in Chinese nationals apprehended at the southwest border, and we know that many of the precursors that are used to create fentanyl are made in China. A lot of fentanyl entering our country originates in China. And now we're seeing an increase in Chinese nationals being captured, which means there's an increase in Chinese nationals that are not being captured. It's been presented to me, it's been posited that the Chinese that are effectively evading law enforcement at the border and entering into our country recognize that over the course of the next couple of years, Republicans are going to take very aggressive actions to gain control, operational control of our border, and shut down this wide open trafficking that they're currently enjoying. So it's been posited to me that Chinese nationals that are crossing into our country include scientists that are coming into America to connect with established criminal networks to bring their laboratory, to build laboratories here. Are Chinese nationals, is HSI looking into this, are Chinese nationals entering America illegally to connect with established criminal networks and bring their laboratory capabilities here into the continental United States because they know the day is coming where we'll have a Republican president and we'll regain control of the border?
Representative Higgins, thank you very much for the question. Good to see you as well. As it pertains to the human smuggling of Chinese nationals and the narcotic side of it, our investigations, as you know, we're an investigative agency, our investigations and intelligence show that those are two separate situations. We see when it comes to China, that's the beginning of the illicit supply chain of fentanyl. We know, we don't have the visibility that we need, of course, into China, but as an investigative agency, we have the visibility of precursor chemicals as they leave Chinese ports to venture across the water into Mexico. Eventually, those precursors will end up in Mexican labs where the actual pills are produced. That's what HSI does. That's where we are strong, and that's where we're critical to this entire supply chain, which is attacking the supply chain at those critical nodes. We can stop the container ships full. I mean, we're talking container ships. We've seized, I believe it's a little bit over 3.3 million pounds of precursor chemicals coming from China, entering into Mexico. When those precursors enter into Mexico, what we do is try to stop them from getting into the labs in Mexico, where it's synthesized, right? That's where the drugs are produced. That's where the cartels are producing it. We utilize our transnational criminal investigative units, which we have a very robust and strong criminal investigative unit in Mexico. Mexican prosecutors, Mexican officials working with us. As I've said multiple times in open hearings, they're working on behalf of the American people. So what we utilize is their efforts, intelligence community and our efforts in order to stop these drugs from coming into the United States and push our borders out to try to alleviate the pressure on our DHS partners and friends so they're not feeling so much of the fentanyl coming in. But to answer your question, we do not see the link investigatively or intelligence right now of the human smuggling aspect as it pertains to the fentanyl coming in from China.
Well, we'll talk further about that in person. Mr. Chairman, I don't see a clock here. How much time?
One right here.
All right, Chief, it's good to see you again, sir. God bless you. Hope you and your family are well. These are difficult times that we face to enforce the laws of our land as we've sworn an oath to do so. And you're at the point of that spear, and to a great deal, you're held responsible. And I think you're a responsible man. I would like to, in my remaining no time, just answer this question regarding commands that are coming down from Secretary Mayorkas. It's come to our attention that many commands that ultimately arrive at the field level don't have much of a paper trail. They've been communicated verbally. You could speak to that, and how does that relate to our aerostat techs? Why are the aerostats down? That's a DOD cooperative operation. They worked. Why are they down? I was told in January they were being pulled down for the first quarter.
I'll give you a real quick 30 seconds, Chief, to answer that. Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman, and good to see you again, Mr. Higgins. I will tell you that with respect to the chain of command, both ICE, myself, and our DHS partners meet quite regularly with the department, more specifically with the Secretary. We have constant conversations and dialogue about ongoing operations, and certainly He's made multiple trips down to the southwest border. So I do appreciate the level of support I get from both our Commissioner, Troy Miller, and Secretary Mayorkas with respect to some of my requests on capacity building and making adjustments to our operations in the field. With respect to the aerostats, that's a very expensive program, $4.6 million for each one of those aerostats. We have 4 of them deployed here in South Texas. They're doing a phenomenal job. We are looking at alternatives to be able to use similar-like technology that may be less expensive, and then we're going to try and do everything we can to incorporate that into our normal operations.
Thank you. Thank you. I'll now recognize Vice Chair Guest from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To both of our gentlemen, thank you for being here. Thank you for the men and women that serve under your command. I want you to know that the frustration and the anger that you may feel today is not directed at you personally, and it's clearly not directed under the men and women that serve under you, but is directed at this administration, which has not only failed the American public, but has failed the officers that serve with you. Chief, I want to expand a little bit on something that Chairman Green touched on. He talked about operational control of the border, and I think you were very candid when you said that we do not have operational control of the border. I want to follow that up with a question. Is the border secure? We have heard repeatedly from Secretary Mayorkas when he has testified before this hearing. He has told myself, he has told Congressman Bishop that. We heard him tell Congressman Roy in a Judiciary Committee the same thing. We've heard the Vice President say that. The Vice President said in an interview with Meet the Press when asked by Chuck Todd, she said the border is secure, but we have a broken immigration system. Then she went on to say we have a secure border and that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration, but there are still a lot of problems. And so my question to you, Chief, is the border secure?
Thank you, Congressman. I will tell you that I'm responsible for the northern border, I'm responsible for our coastal sectors, and I'm responsible for the southwest border. And I'm going to break it down real quick. Northern border, I have 8 sectors up on the northern border, and I've got 1 sector that is experiencing an awful lot of influx of migrants from Canada. I went to Ottawa, Canada about 4 weeks ago, met with my RCMP partners, and we're addressing that threat. I've got 25 additional agents deployed up there. And at one point, I had 854 officers deployed from the northern border to the southern border to help with the situation that we were encountering. I no longer have to do that. Out in our coastal sectors, I've got tremendous.
And don't want to cut you off, Chief, but my time is the southern border secure. I'm not worried about the northern border. Let's talk strictly about the southern border. Is your testimony that it is secure or is not secure?
When you look at the southwest border, I have 9 southwest border sectors from San Diego to here to South Texas, Rio Grande Valley. Out of the 9 southwest border sectors, I feel like the men and women are doing a phenomenal job in 4 of them with respect to the amount of flow and the processing that we are encountering on a daily basis. 5 of those southwest border sectors are experiencing a higher level of flow than we have seen previously, and that creates some unique challenges for us, and it puts a strain on the overall immigration system, not just for myself, but for our partner agencies, for our sheriff's departments, police departments. And so I have to move resources into those 5 southwest border sectors, and that forces me to make some adjustments across the entire 2,000 miles of the southwest border.
All right, so I'm taking it then as your testimony that 5 of the 9 sectors on the southwest border are not currently secure. Let me ask you if you would agree with this statement. This is a statement that Colonel McGraw with the Texas Department of Public Safety, he will be testifying in the second panel. I'm sure you know him well and you work very closely with him. He, in his written statement, said that it is the assessment of the Texas Department of Public Safety that the most significant public safety and homeland security threat to Texas and our nation is an unsecured border with Mexico. He goes on to say, and again, this is not directed at your men individually, but more at the administration, the federal government has failed to do its constitutional duty and secure the border. This failure comes at the detriment of our citizens and the benefit of the Mexican cartels. And, of course, we have seen Mexican cartels become extremely active in human trafficking and drug smuggling. We saw the Gulf Cartel kill 2 Americans, shot another just recently south of Brownsville. Of course, we saw very disturbing images this week of the mass surge there at the El Paso port of entry, where I believe there were roughly 1,000 immigrants who tried to surge into the United States. And so my question is, do you agree with the statement of Colonel McGraw when he talks about that this is a public safety threat and a threat to Homeland Security?
Yes, sir. I do agree with Colonel McCraw. I have an excellent relationship with the state of Texas. We continue to work those partnerships, both with our sheriffs, our police departments here in Texas and across the southwest border. I will tell you this, though, when you think about a secure border, right now we're experiencing about 4,800 apprehensions a day in a 24-hour period. Our agents are doing a phenomenal job across the entire southwest border managing that. I'm not having to decompress flights like I was having to do 3 and 4 months ago. We're able to repatriate more individuals to their host country now than we ever have. 31 flights last week, 35 flights this week. We need to continue these consequences in order to affect the right response and the right effect across these border situations.
And Chief, I know I'm out of time, but you and I were in a hearing in D.C. on Tuesday. With us was an admiral from the Coast Guard. That admiral testified that mass immigration is a national security issue. Do you agree with his assessment?
Yes, sir.
I now recognize Mr. Bishop of North Carolina.
Chief Ortiz, I think you came in here to tell the truth today, sit down and offer some candor to this congressional committee. And I want to start off by telling you that that is a breath of fresh air, and it is inconsistent with what I've heard over and over from administration officials so far. You have candidly acknowledged in responses to questions already that we do not have operational control of the border. You've effectively acknowledged that the border is not secure on much of the southwestern border. I think you might be trying to walk a fine line because you don't want to be insubordinate to your superiors. But if there's ever been a time for candor to a congressional committee, it is right now. And I'm going to ask you about the cause. You've continued to, your written testimony, I'm sure that's substantially prepared or revised in Washington, starts off, evolving global and regional events continue to produce challenging conditions and trends along the southwestern border. You trace the beginning of the fantastic climb in illegal immigration across the border to COVID. I heard you say earlier today, changing conditions. Chief, in fiscal year 2020, the policy was detain and remove. The entire objective was to avoid releasing any illegal immigrant for any reason. In 2021, Secretary Mayorkas, the new administration, gutted all of those policies. MPP, safe third countries, family detention, asylum bars, T-42 for minors, etc. Record numbers resulted. Record numbers followed. Let me say that, because I'm going to ask you whether it was result or cause. Be it parole, NTA, NTR, etc. Illegals are apprehended by Border Patrol but allowed to remain non-detained in the U.S. Now, I want some candor, Chief. Do you acknowledge, as the Chief of the Border Patrol, that the driver of the crisis that you have described, of this dramatic change in flow, the policy is the policy of this administration to release instead of detain or remove illegal immigrants? That's my question.
Congressman Bishop, thank you for the question. I will tell you that law enforcement is pretty simple, sir. You have to have capacity and you have to have consequences. And anytime you don't have consequences, you're certainly going to see some increases. And we continue to try and repatriate individuals back to countries that we can repatriate. But it's been a challenge for us because what we saw this past year were individuals from Cuba, individuals from Haiti, individuals from Nicaragua, where we have a difficult time repatriating. It's not my responsibility. I work closely with my ICE partners to make sure that we're able to expel or, return individuals back to their host countries, but it has been a significant challenge for us, and I do think that has been a driver of some of the increases that we have seen.
So you've attenuated that a little bit, Chief. I appreciate, again, I think you've been candid in that answer, but you've attenuated it. It's a driver of some of the increases. Sir, we're all familiar with this chart. I mean, we see it in our sleep. right? I came into Congress down here in fiscal year 2020. And I visited as soon as I came down. I came down to the border then, and I saw the empty port of entry station where nobody was in there flooded. You'd seen the films from back in May. And here's where we are now, sir. That was December, worst in history, and we've been up in that territory for years. And there's always been 1 billion people live on less than $1 a day. Poor, as Chairman Green said. The cause is the change in policy. Is it not, sir? Will you be candid enough to be unequivocal and clear that that has driven the change?
I will tell you, sir, that when I was a deputy chief and the acting chief down here in 2014, you know, a lot of people described what was happening here in South Texas as a humanitarian crisis, a border crisis. And I was very candid, and I said that I think we have a bit of a policy crisis. And I still hold true that we have some policies in place where we need to ensure that the men and women out there patrolling the border, investigating these criminal cartels, are actually allowed to do their job each and every day.
And their job is to detain or remove illegal immigrants.
Yes, sir.
And you've talked about, and your pride, look, I want to say this, your pride in the men and women you lead, and I know what the circumstances is that compels you to come in here and show this level of candor to this congressional committee, and that's the men and women that you're serving, because they're under stress like they've never seen. And it is an abomination. It is despicable that people in Washington would set policy that would cause that to those men and women, and that would cause the inhumane destruction of lives that you see to migrants who are coming over in these conditions, and that would cause the devastation that's spreading throughout the United States in consequence of that. I want to thank you for telling the Congress what your duty compels you to tell us, which is the truth. Thank you, Chief Ortiz.
Gentleman yields. I recognize Mr. Jimenez from Florida.
Thank you very much, and thank you, Chief Ortiz, for your candor. You're in a tough spot, okay, and I know. I have a question for you. Supposedly we have 1.3 million getaways that we know of. What is your estimate of the people that we don't know about that got away?
Thank you, Congressman Jimenez, and good to see you again, sir. I will tell you that the got-away number is a number that for a long time was associated with art. It was our agents out there actually cutting swaths of country and using, you know, footprints as an indicator as to what we were seeing out there. That was our situational awareness. With the investments that this Congress has made into the Border Patrol, CBP as a whole, we have greater situational awareness now than I've ever had. My confidence level in that got-away number continues to increase. Is it 100%? No, sir. At 385,000 gotaways so far this fiscal year, we continue to refine that number. I've got to do a better job of accounting for the actual encounters.
Chief, I have limited time. I just need a number. What percentage of the 1.3 that you know got away, how much more do you think got away that you don't know about?
In my estimation, based upon the situational awareness that I have, probably be between 10 and 20%, sir.
More?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kagan, HSI, I equate the chemicals coming from mainly China as being the weapons, and then I equate the cartels as being the soldiers. You spoke a lot about the weapon, trying to stop the flow of the drug or the precursor chemicals, et cetera, et cetera. I didn't hear much about the soldiers, the cartels themselves. What are you doing about the soldiers?
Thank you for the question. Good to see you again. The cartels, the TCOs as a whole, we investigate them together. So you're breaking it up separately. We don't break it up separately because one needs the other back and forth. The work that we're doing to go after the cartels in Mexico and push the borders out is definitely done on the ground with our men and women within all of the U.S. government, and our partnerships. One thing that we are strong with is the partnerships with Mexico. I do understand that over the years, different political pressures in different areas swing, but on the ground as HSI working with our partners, we have great partnerships. A huge vetted unit that is very strong. I believe it's just around 60 active criminal investigations on the drug cartels as we speak today, and they're very strong in how they operate.
Is that being conducted investigations in Mexico? Are they going to be charged in Mexico? Are they going to be charged in the United States? Where are these soldiers going to be charged? And
it depends. It depends on the investigation, the level of the investigation, whether it's the leaders of the cartel, whether it's the henchmen, whatever it may be. It depends on where they're prosecuted. We extradite people often to serve, to come in front of a jury here in the U.S., but we also then help, and this is why we're so strong with our Mexican partners, because we work cases that are mutually beneficial. So if they're trying to go after corruption,
again, I only have limited time, and I need to get to some points that I want to make. Sorry to cut you off.
That's fine, sir.
Okay. Would it surprise you? According to the LA Times, Mexican overdoses, people that died in Mexico, okay, numbered something like 1,700 in 2020. They numbered over 100,000 here in the United States. And even taking into account the difference in population, by my math, it's like 25. We are 25 times more likely to have an overdose death in the United States than we are in Mexico, which seems kind of strange to me, seeing that that's where the stuff is produced. So it's one of two things. Either they're vastly underreporting the overdose deaths in Mexico, which then would make the Mexican people go a little bit, be perturbed at their leadership for not doing something about it, or there's something going on, some kind of unwritten rule that maybe they produce it there and they don't really sell it there, they don't push it there, but they do push it up here. So I'm really disturbed about that. And so these numbers continue to rise. We don't have control of the southern border. The testimony from the chief says that the cartels now control the southern border, many portions of the southern border, and these soldiers are killing 100,000 Americans. And so I'm not sure what it is that you're doing, but whatever you're doing, I don't think it's enough at this point. Sorry. Thank you. My time is up.
Gentleman yields, and I recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger.
Thank you, Chairman. America, wake up. Look over here to the side, to the colleagues that should be here, to my Democrat colleagues. How disrespectful is it? Chief, thank you for being here. Director, thank you for being here. Please tell everyone in your organization thank you for their service. It's extremely disrespectful of my Democrat colleagues to not be here, to not support those who would put their lives on the line to keep our country safe. America needs to wake up to that fact. Chairman Thompson said last year that he would have a border hearing, and he never did. And now he's acting as a partisan agent. Chief Ortiz, we were in Del Rio under that bridge together with the 20,000 Haitian migrants. We've been in El Paso together. We've been here together. You've mentioned that we don't have operational control of the border, that in over 50% of the southwest border that it's not secure. You've talked about capacity and consequences. And my question for you is, have you shared as the expert, I'd like you to channel that first and second year Agent Ortiz, Officer Ortiz, the tactical expert. Have you shared your recommendations of how to secure the border with Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas?
I would tell you that the Secretary and I have candid conversations about what's happening on the southwest border, and we are exploring every opportunity to make sure that we continue to add capacity for the men and women out there. So to answer your question, yes, I have shared my operational experiences from the last 32 years with the Secretary.
So one of those has been consequences. Every agent that I talk to, hundreds of agents that work within CBP, have mentioned that they don't believe that there are consequences, that they don't believe. And you've mentioned the repatriation flights. Is the Secretary listening to your recommendations? Because it certainly appears that that's not happening.
Yes, I will tell you that the Secretary and myself have increased consequences for criminal aliens. We've seen more criminal aliens apprehended in the last 24 months than we've seen previously, and we continue to prosecute, work with our DOJ partners and our AUSAs across the southwest border. We are sitting at about a 93% acceptance rate. Certainly not enough. We need to add more capacity. We need to have more assistant U.S. attorneys. We need to have more prosecutions agents so we can ensure that we instill those consequences that you described. But I will say that we have increased the level of prosecutions across the southwest border in the neighborhood of about 35%. And so that needs to continue, sir.
Chief, when you look at the cartels and the fact that they're making billions of dollars off of the human trafficking, the smuggling of drugs, the humanitarian crisis. 53 people died in a tractor trailer in July of last year south of San Antonio, not too far from here. Do you believe that the cartels are acting as a terrorist organization?
Whether they're acting as a terrorist organization or a criminal organization, I think that the Border Patrol, CBP, DHS, all of our partner agencies need to concentrate their efforts against the cartels because they certainly are working both in the human trafficking arena as well as the narcotics trafficking arena. And we recognize that they have expanded their capabilities immensely. And so I think it's got to be a whole of government approach. And for me, they are criminals. They are 100% criminal organizations.
Do you believe that we are acting as a whole of government approach to prevent the cartels from what they're doing?
I will tell you from a law enforcement perspective, we've got tremendous partnerships, and we're going to continue to do that. Once again, I believe it's a capacity issue. We need more officers on the front lines.
Do you think we can do more?
Yes, sir.
Director Kagan, you've seized 3.3 million pounds of precursor chemicals. How much money have the cartels profited as a result of shipping that fentanyl? I'm looking at several sheriffs behind you from my district who are experiencing the trauma, the chaos from fentanyl in our own communities. How much money are the cartels making year in and year out?
I don't have the specific answer for you, but we have a fentanyl problem, and we need to fix it. And
how do we fix that problem?
I agree with the chief. More capacity building, more people on the border to secure the border, as well as more investigative efforts. We have to surge our resources to the border, which is what we do, and we have done it for years. Operation Expanded Impact is HSI's framework that we utilize to surge resources to the border in times like this. But it hits a point where there's so drugs coming across and humans coming across that we need more resources on the border, especially when I mentioned that CBP Office of Field Operations is going to increase their non-inspection capabilities. It's only going to create more responses to the ports of entry, more investigations, which is more resources that HSI will need in order to combat and investigate these transnational criminal organizations.
Thank you, Chairman. My time has expired. Yield back.
Gentleman yields. The chair recognizes Ms. Green from Georgia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chief Ortiz, for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Kagan. I appreciate the jobs that you do, as well as the men and women that work under you. They have very difficult jobs, and we are so appreciative of them. But I'm going to be very honest with both of you. After listening to all of this, I am so angry. I cannot believe the incredible failure of our federal government and to the American people. And also to the Border Patrol agents, ICE agents, the jobs that they do and how incredibly difficult their jobs are based on the failed policies that they are forced to operate under. It is absurd. I live in Georgia. My state is not a border state, but let me inform you of some of the things that we're dealing with. Here in Georgia, fentanyl-involved deaths has increased by over 230% since Biden has taken office. In my district alone, we have had fentanyl-involved deaths increase by over 350%. I can tell you right now, the policies do not work. And we are sick and tired of our young people dying, our emergency responders getting poisoned by fentanyl. This is unacceptable. Chief Ortiz, are you aware that there was an explosive device found by Border Patrol agents on January 17th in an area called No Man's Land, and there's surveillance of who put it there? And guess what? It wasn't Americans, it was cartels. Are you aware of that?
Thank you, Congresswoman, and good to see you again. I will tell you that some of this information that I receive in a confidential skiff, so I'm going to be a little hesitant of briefing what I know and what I don't know with respect to some of those, an event like that.
I understand, Chief Ortiz, but I'm not going to be confidential because I think people deserve to know. Our Border Patrol agents should not be in those type of conditions where they are at risk of being blown to pieces by the cartels, who, by the way, are criminals, and they should be treated as such. As a matter of fact, I've co-sponsored legislation to declare war on the cartels because they are definitely declaring war on us, the American people, and our Border Patrol agents, and I've had enough of it, and I know Americans have had enough of it. Mr. Kagan, are you aware of such explosive device being found by Border Patrol agents?
I am not.
Mr. Kagan, since you have to deal greatly in all the horrific drugs that are poisoning Americans every day, let's talk about kids for a little bit. We were just told this morning that kids aged 13 to 17 are being recruited by the cartels, dangerous cartels, even MS-13, and they are being used to smuggle drugs, traffic drugs into our country, having it taped across their bodies. They're also recruited because many of them have U.S. citizenship because they've come in our country, and they're used to drive and smuggle humans and drugs back and forth across our border. Can you elaborate on that?
Thank you, and good to see you as well. The cartels are very good, and transnational criminal organizations are very good at going after vulnerable populations. You see that with the immigrants that are coming up. You see that with, as you're talking about, kids. This is something that has gone on for a long time. I worked in Mexico for 4 years. So here, seeing cartels, seeing TCOs go after vulnerable children and vulnerable populations is something that definitely happens. They will go after any vulnerable population in order to move their drugs north and or move their guns and profits south.
Yes,
so,
but
yes,
Mr. Kagan, let me interrupt you for a minute. This has been a large increase in just the past 2 years and how many teenagers and even children are being used to traffic drugs. The increase is there, and it's showing that the policies are failing.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I didn't catch the question.
I said there's been a large increase in children being used trafficking drugs into our country and being recruited by gangs, and it's just happened in the past few years, and the policies are failing. So what change needs to be made?
I don't have data on the increase in children being used. My time that I'm speaking about goes all the way back into 2007 to 2010 when I was in New Mexico. So I don't have any comment on increase or decrease. So that's not, as an investigative arm of DHS, not here to focus on.
Well, I can tell you right now, I have the statistics. Deaths of 350% in the past 2 years in my district from fentanyl. That's proof that the increase is there, and we are devastated.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be disingenuous. There is definitely increase in fentanyl coming here. There's definitely, we all have seen the increase in death in children. I was just on a panel a few months ago sitting next to 3 parents who had lost their children. It's the hardest time that I've ever had to testify in my entire life.
Then I think, you know what I think, you guys, and I'm going to be really honest with everyone, I could care less about politics at this point. All I care about is policies put in place that allow our great men and women to do their job to secure our country. And our country is not safe. And our people are being poisoned by fentanyl every single day. I cannot believe it's the #1 cause of death of people from ages 18 to 45. That is unacceptable. And I think that we need to all be honest, and who cares about who our boss is and who cares about who's in office. We need to be honest and forthcoming about the changes that need to be made to secure our country, because America is all of our home. No, it doesn't matter about Republican, Democrat, or who cares. It's everybody's home. And what I would like to see done is real frank conversation about what to do to fix this problem. Thank you very much.
The gentlelady yields. The chair recognizes Mr. Lalota from New York.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chief and Director, for being here. Most of us in this room and back at home learned in about the 11th grade that in the legislative branch, we pass the laws and we appropriate and authorize the money, and the executive branch enforces the laws and spends that money. And my question is to you, Chief, with respect to fiber optic sensors and light posts, because the frustration of the Congress and this committee is we've done our job. We've authorized the money. The appropriators have appropriated that money. We've sent resources to the executive branch. But we're frustrated that the President and Secretary Mayorkas have failed to enforce those laws and properly utilize those resources. So my question with respect to the fiber optic sensors, which we understand are an important piece to our border security, can you tell us the status of these sensors? Are they on? Where do they exist? And have any of them been turned off, Chief?
So I'm going to work that backwards. Thank you, Congressman, for the question. None of them have been turned off. We have them deployed across various locations along the southwest border. I would prefer not to share exactly the location, but I will tell you that we continue to expand the linear ground detection system in areas where where 300 miles of infrastructure was slated to be constructed. That is an ongoing project. We continue to make those investments. We are quite often in the real estate and the environmental process. I checked with my team actually this morning, and even here in South Texas, we have ongoing deployments of underground sensors throughout the area of responsibility.
Chief, would the addition of more fiber optic sensors increase our border security?
Most definitely, sir. We have areas along the southwest border where perhaps your traditional infrastructure, a wall or barrier system, may not be as beneficial both to the community, to the ranchers, to the farmers, and perhaps maybe a virtual linear ground detection system might be the best course of action. And in those areas, we are certainly working hard to make sure that those systems are deployed.
Chief, with respect to the permitting process, we understand and respect people's personal property rights, but can you explain and describe some of the frustrations you've seen with some of the permitting process, Chief?
So across the southwest border, we deal with private landowners. We deal with the federal government refuge property. We deal with certainly areas that are protected lands. And so all of that creates a challenge for us. The Secretary has leveraged his CADX authority to allow us to continue some of these programs and initiatives to ensure that we have those tools that allow us to have situational awareness out there along the southwest border. We're closing gates and gaps. We've already closed 55 of the gates and gaps, and we're remediating the levee system here in South Texas and some of the other areas. And so this idea that, you know, we turned off all infrastructure is inaccurate. We continue to propose recommendations that represent life safety or threats into the community, and we've seen approvals on several of those projects already.
Can you describe how long some of the permitting process takes, and what, if anything, is holding you up from the installation of some of this new fiber optic capability?
So it varies depending on location. What we've seen here in South Texas, some of the records, the real estate and who owns the property are sometimes go back multiple generations, and so that becomes a tremendous challenge for our real estate experts. And then in some other areas, it moves quite rapidly. So it just varies depending on location. And I will tell you that in the last 24 months, 36 months that I've been up at Washington, D.C., I can continue to push the infrastructure program as well as the underground detection system, because I do think it is probably the wave of the future.
Please continue to give that feedback, Chief. Moving on to the light posts. Have any of the light posts been turned off?
No, sir. None of the light posts have been turned off. We are challenged with some of the remote video sensor camera systems. There's a backlog with the supply chain issues that we experience both in our fleet and some of the technology. We're starting to catch up over the last 6 months.
And can you describe the lack of operational lampposts and what that could do to border security?
So the inability to have situation awareness, to not have the border areas lit up or have camera systems deployed, really decreases my confidence in the got away number. And so we want to maintain as much situational awareness out in that border environment, and all of those are tools that we leverage in every sector along the southwest border.
Thanks, Chief. Chairman, I yield.
The gentleman yields. I now recognize Ms. Lee from Florida.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, a federal judge in the Northern District of Florida, Kent Wetherill, ruled that the Biden administration's policy of parole and alternatives to detention is unlawful. The judge stated, in part, that the administration had effectively turned the southwest border into a meaningless line in the sand and little more than a speed bump for aliens flooding into the country. Chief Ortiz, my question for you is this. Were you aware of Judge Wetherill's ruling and his conclusion about that parole and alternatives to detention policy?
Congresswoman Lee, thank you for the question. And yes, I am aware. I was deposed for that case, and then on January 10th, I was in testimony before the judge in Florida. So I was aware of his final ruling last week.
To this point, have any of the policies related to parole and alternatives to detention been modified or adjusted in light of the court's ruling?
So we weren't paroling over the last several months. Our numbers in the last 60 days have dropped significantly. We're averaging about 4,800 apprehensions. So there wasn't a requirement for us to parole. We release to detention or to ICE enforcement removal operations, and then we've been able to leverage Title 42 considerably. And so we haven't had to leverage that over the last 60 days.
So to this point, have any of the policies at Border Patrol been modified or adjusted, or had to have been modified or adjusted in light of the court's ruling?
In light of the court's ruling, what we did is we informed all sectors that they were not to parole individuals outside of a specific individual case for a humanitarian reason, or if somebody was a material witness in a human trafficking case.
And to your knowledge, are there any plans to make further modifications, or do you feel like the changes that have been made so far are adequate?
I think the changes that have been made so far are adequate, ma'am.
Okay. I'd like to return to the discussion of infrastructure. And specifically, we know that during this administration, the border wall itself, construction on the border wall itself, was halted. Did that halting of construction include shutting off other technology installations like lighting and roads and other things attendant to that construction?
Yeah, the proposed requirement of 750 miles of border wall infrastructure included roads, lighting, and camera systems. We currently have about 450 miles of border wall constructed along the southwest border. We had some projects that were midway through the construction process. And so what we have done is looked at all of those projects individually and have submitted a request to the Secretary to have approval to continue those projects. He has granted approval in, I believe, 29 of those projects already. And